Kyaw, thank you for coming in. You have a remarkable background of accomplishment, resilience, and hard work from your early days to your educational studies and so on that you've done in the US, to your vision for education, which is all about inclusion and diversity and empowerment. And so it's such a wonderful journey, and you display so much innovation and inventiveness and courage. Thank you for coming in and sharing your insights with our audience.
Thank you very much, Stephen. It's really my pleasure.
So, Joel, what were those magic inflection points in your life that empowered you? And it could have been something that happened when you were 3 or 5, could have been a family member, could have been something that happened in your community, and then maybe some insights. When you traveled abroad and you got more education, and then which enabled you to think and to work on this marvelous journey that you're on today. So can you share some of that with our audience?
Thank you very much, Stephen. First of all, let me just first say thank you very much for inviting me on this platform. It's really my honor and pleasure to be able to share my experiences and my life journey. Um, I would say most of uh, uh, what made me become who I am today was really shaped during my college years. I went to a liberal arts college in Massachusetts called Bard College at Simon's Rock. And that really gave me a broad liberal arts and sciences educational background, which transformed me and opened up a lot my eyes. I came from a very I should say a narrowly defined educational pathway back in Burma. And now that I'm exposed to liberal arts and sciences education, that opened up a lot of my eyes, and we read a lot of great books, Western thinking, Western perspectives, as well as Eastern thinking, Eastern perspectives, and that opened up my eyes. And secondly, I should say, uh, what shaped me to become who I am today is because of my dad. During my college years, my dad sent me these letters, handwritten letters, and he encouraged me to look beyond my life, my personal life, and constantly think about giving back to the community, uh, to Burmese young Burmese people, to my community for the national development as well as development for the world. And then so that made me to think about what I want to do in the future.
So what I'm hearing is that you grew up in Burma, and you had this view and inclusion into the system there and the educational system, and you got one perspective, and then you managed to continue your education in the US. And was that under full scholarship, or how did that come about?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, I went through a public high school in Burma, and I was really lost after that high school. No, I knew that I want to go abroad and study and expand my horizon, but I didn't know what to do. But thank God, we have the former dean of Bard College at Simon's Rock, which is in Massachusetts. He came to Burma, and he wanted to offer scholarships, full ride scholarships to students in Burma. So I took a test, and luckily I got selected. And so I was able to go and study at Bard College at Simon's Rock on full ride scholarship, including room and board and everything. So that was a life-changing moment for me.
So that's interesting. So you get a full ride scholarship with Bard at Bard College, which is a quite a well-known, very prestigious college in the U.S., and that gave you another cultural experience, right? Because you got students from all over the world there, and Bard is very much into diversity and equity and inclusion.
That's
And
right.
thank you, very forward thinking. And then you have your dad. What I'm hearing is your dad writing you letters and saying, you know what, John, you gotta, I want to encourage you to think in a broader sense about giving back to humanity, giving back in a broader sense, and then using your talent to do that. Um, so that must have been really interesting. So your dad was quite transformational in your journey.
Absolutely, he is an inspiration. He is well liked by his friends and his community and his organizations that he works with. He worked with. He had influenced a lot of people in Yangon and throughout Burma as well. And he is very charitable. That's something that I really liked about my dad. He's charitable, forward thinking, and very generous with his time and efforts. He got himself involved in many community organizing activities. Chinese association. I'm ethnically Chinese, and my father got himself involved in a lot of charitable Chinese activities in Burma as well. Very community oriented.
Yeah, so that's really, really fascinating. And your dad or your family must be really amazed of you studying in the U.S. under full scholarship. And so, what did you study then? What did you got an undergrad degree, went on to your master's, then to your PhD? Can we get into more detail about that? So,
Sure.
so in high school in Burma, were you really interested in the sciences, sort of naturally oriented to that way, or were kind of your parents kind of shaping you in that direction?
Yeah, I was always naturally interested in science. My parents are were well, my dad passed away. My mom is still alive. They are both I should say they didn't complete formal educational system at all, right? Um, my dad finished maybe fourth grade. My mom finished second grade, something like that. And so they didn't really know how to advise in my educational path. But I was very lucky to be in a community of students, young learners in Burma, and as I mentioned, with the former dean of um, Bard College at Sciences who came to Burma and gave me a scholarship. And so I went to Bard College at Sciences from 2005 2009 with a one-year study abroad opportunity at Oxford University in the UK. And then after that, I went to Yale University for my master's and PhD in chemistry, and all in science. And so yeah, the entire I knew from the high school uh, that I was interested in science and wanted to pursue a career in science. But of course, things changed after my PhD, which we can I'll be able I can explain more in details as well later on.
Okay, so you had this early talent and interest in science and mathematics and so on. You were able to leverage that to get advanced degrees in science. And because my audience use computers and there's a lot of computational thinking and so on,
Absolutely.
let's just spend a little bit of time talking about that aspect. I mean, chemistry or organic chemistry, there's a lot of computational aspects to all of that now, including AI machine learning for novel molecule design, or
Yeah,
you can even simulate interaction between molecules and so on
that's
using
right.
computers and AI machine learning
Yep.
and data analytics. So was that part of your journey, and is that continuing to be part of your journey, the use of technology and computers?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, oh, we even so first, what I did was organic synthesis, meaning we build the molecules naturally active or biologically active, pharmaceutical molecules, let's say, using organic synthetic methods in a laboratory. And so I was involved in synthesizing a biologically active molecule called huperzine A, which is a potential drug in the treatment of Alzheimer's disease. And it's known to uh, 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 treat the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, and it's also known to uh, slow down the progression of Alzheimer's disease. So we were making this molecule in a laboratory, and we made it and we patented it. And then I moved on to work on anti-malaria molecules, well. And throughout it all, we knew and we have used the computational chemistry as one of the major tools in our methodology. Computational chemistry, as we know in the field of chemistry, is going to play a very important role going forward. Even now, we're using computational methods to see whether certain molecular interactions would happen to make a bond or not. And these, rather than doing labor-intensive chemical reactions on very difficult to maintain or difficult to control reactions, we can try it out in a computer in a simulated environment to see whether a certain chemical reaction would happen or not. And then so these are going to become more day-to-day tools in organic synthesis and in chemistry in general. So with a lot of data and data science and computational technology, this is a growing field in chemistry.
Yeah, I mean, in the novel molecular design and synthesis, you can also use deep neural networks in this. Large language models can be used in this.
That's right.
You can also use exascale supercomputers or high performance computing. In a few years, you may even be able to get into zettascale supercomputing. Quantum computing has applications in this area as a promise, and there's already some work going into this area. So really all of the sort of future aspects of it as well. So have you looked at any of these supercomputing kind of technologies or quantum computing, or do you plan to look at some of that work that's being done? AI machine learning already makes sense, right? Because there's quite a bit of work already being done in that area. Are you planning to explore some of these other areas, or are you currently exploring some of these areas?
I am not currently exploring some of these areas at all. My current role is quite has taken quite a big turn in my career. After while I was doing my PhD, Bard College was planning to establish a branch campus in Burma, and they offered me a job to go and become a professor of chemistry there back then, but then unfortunately the plan didn't work out, and so after my PhD I was thinking of actually like, oh, maybe I should do postdoc, but then between 2010 and 2020 the country Burma was opening up and so many investment opportunities, so many development opportunities for the country, and there's so much hope in Burma. And then so I decided to put a pause in my career in science and turned to national development. So I went back to Burma at the end of 2014, devote my life to what I could do in Burma, and then so start working in the education field. And hopefully in the future I could go back to science as well. That's my passion and my my interest. And so in whatever capacity that I could go back into science, I like to go back. But right now, my focus is on university administration, university development, and with what my father had told me, to give back to the community, to give back to the young people of Burma, for national development. That's where I'm working on, to nurture a whole young wave of young people empowered with critical thinking, professional development, and for the national development. So that's what I'm currently working on.
So that's really, really fascinating. So because of Bard's program, which is very much about diversity, inclusion, talent development globally, they got you involved, and then it ended up they weren't able to continue in that program in Burma, but you were able to still maintain those relationships, and you were able to do this educational development program based out of the US. Can you talk more about that? You've got a US entity, right?
Yes, absolutely. So I went back to Burma at the end of 2014. And I worked in a nonprofit educational institution for a while, for about a year. And then after that, I started Parami Institute, which was a postgraduate certificate leadership program for young graduates from public universities in Burma. And we ran that program for 3.5 or 4 years, and it's still going on right now as a virtual university, mainly because of the political insecurity inside Burma after February 1st, 2021, when the civilian government was demolished. So after that, because of a lot of physical insecurities on the ground, a lot of fighting on the ground, we switched to virtual university, and I incorporated a Parami University based out of Washington, D.C., under the D.C. government. And so Parami now has a U.S. institution status with a degree granting authority from the Washington, D.C. government. And throughout it all, Bard had been a great partner throughout it all. And initially, we would think, with a residential liberal arts university in Burma, Bard would grant up dual degrees along with Parami University degrees that licensed out of Burma. But then now that we are based out of Washington, D.C., we are going to be granting degrees from the Washington, D.C. government, authority. But still, Bard is committed to Parami, and Bard will be granting dual degrees, Bard degrees to our students in Burma. So right now we have associate degrees and bachelor degrees licensed out of Washington, D.C. for students in Burma, studying online synchronously.
So that's interesting then that you got Bard to recognize the educational programs that you're running because they're granting degrees from your
That's right.
university, which is constituted in the US. So that's an interesting model because it's online, then it allows really anybody to take that kind of, it's a global program in essence.
That's right. That's right. In fact, we do have some refugee students from other countries as well, Kenya, things like that.
And it's interesting to continue that association with Bard. There's also regional authorities. What's your status on these sort of regional accreditation authorities? You've got work in progress with that as well, I believe.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, so we as an institution that is recently established, accreditation agencies typically want you to wait until you finish a full cycle of a bachelor's degree. So 4 years until you are eligible to apply for accreditation. And then so Parami University, as of now, is unaccredited. We are not eligible for accreditation yet, but that's not a concern to our students really, because they will also be receiving Bard College degrees in a dual degree partnership manner. So and as Bard College is regionally accredited, our students are going to receive value added degrees.
Right, and then when the timing is better, then you'll apply for a direct accreditation as well. But you're very fortunate to have Bard accreditation already, right? So
that's right.
So in terms of your faculty, then, are you able to pull from Bard faculty or not?
Absolutely. Bard, Parami, we are very closely knit in that sense. So Parami has opportunities to engage with the Bard faculty as well. We can bring them in, and we have the Open Society University Network, which was founded by Bard College and Central European University, the two founding members of the Open Society University Network, and Parami University is a member of the Open Society University Network. And we have tens of Open Society University Network online classes in which students from Burma, Parami University, can enroll and get credits in classes taught by all member institutions. So we share classes. It's an amazing, innovative, very collaborative opportunity for students as well as students from other universities within the network. And so our students are not just engaging with the faculty from Parami University, they are engaging with BARD faculty, Central European University faculty, as well as faculty from Ashesi University in Ghana, faculty from Breck University in Bangladesh, and faculty from Europe as well. Really many continents. So it's a great opportunity for students.
So this is a big realization of your vision. So now let's forecast out, let's say to 2030. Where will you be? What is your vision of, if I were to interview you in 2030, what will you say when I ask you about your university?
Thank you. We always aim to have a residential nonprofit liberal arts and sciences university in Burma, and I hope that in a couple of years, things in Burma are more settled and more peaceful. Right now, there's a lot of fighting going on inside Burma that really poses a lot of security issues, and I hope that we can address all these issues very soon, and we can return to Burma to have a physical campus. And so that's my hope for the university.
Do you envision any kind of campus facilities in the US as well, or outside of Burma?
Not really, not really. We are right now licensed by the Washington D.C. government, and once we can establish a residential university in Burma, I would still I would say that I would still maintain that licensure status out of Washington D.C. Because you never know what the future is gonna bring. So I would still like to maintain that U.S. licensure in Burma. But then of course we'll have to apply for licensure from the Burmese government as well by then, and have that a dual licensure status.
So what I'm hearing then is you already have the affiliation with BARD, and BARD grants degrees to your students. You're in the pipeline for future regional accreditation in the US. And then ultimately, you also want to have a physical residential program in Burma, because you want to do national development and empowerment through education. Is that sort of sums where you see things going?
Absolutely. Stephen. Yeah. We want to create a regional university in Burma with the best tools and methods of learning. Which are the hallmarks of liberal arts and sciences education, and we want to create a hub, a center in Burma for students throughout Asia.
I see. So more like an Asian model. So it's not just for students out of Burma, but really from the region, you want to be a
That's
hub
right. That's right.
of education. Well, you're relatively young yet, so you have the ability. You're in your 30s, right? I believe.
37.
So you have another 40 years of building out your vision or more. And because I feel that aging is going to be solved within the next few years, then it could be sort of a continuum. And so you got this educational vision, but now you're in administration, right? You're the head of the university. Like, what is your role with the university, and how do you see that changing? And do you ever think you'll ever get back to research or anything like that, or not?
Yeah, hopefully. I right now, as the president of a university, my focus is on fundraising, which is what all presidents of universities have to do. Engage with the donors, finding new donors and new supporters, and finding partnerships as well with different organizations, establishing these partnerships for mutual benefit for the students, for the university, for the organizations that we will be partnering with, these organizations would include, of course, a nonprofits as well as for-profit corporations, so that our students can benefit from these affiliations, associations, and these affiliations should also benefit the partner organizations that we work with. So my focus, I would say 80% of my time is really focused on finding these partnerships, fundraising, and development. And the rest, I engage with my trustees for regular updates, of course, as well as engaging with my faculty and my administrative staff. And I also teach one course one class every year in fall semester. So I'm actually teaching this semester. And I love teaching. I love engaging with students, and that, I believe that university presidents must engage with students regularly in a course setting, or in a town hall meeting, um, or um, or workshops, or programming of some sort, to really see what your students are like. And that's really important when you report even to your donors and trustees. So my time is really 80% fundraising, development partnerships, 20% engaging with faculty, students, and administrative staff,
So
and
how are
teaching.
you finding then the acceptance? It used to be that, the traditional educational model is you went to a physical university and a residential program, and then it became more of a hybrid model. So you start seeing hybrid models coming out where you could do some online and virtual courses together with a residential. And then you could see more of this movement towards, full online education. But do you feel that the public isn't really there yet? Or, do you see a little bit of pushback against an online model?
Well, there was quite a bit of pushback right after COVID, I should say. Um, maybe like 6 months or so. But once people realize that they don't have an option and they start, innovating, to be honest, I also had my doubts when I first engaged in online learning. Full transparency. I thought this is not going to work. It's not going to be effective at all. And I was very, very skeptical of online learning, online, even synchronous learning. And when we didn't have a lot of options anymore, I started engaging, seriously innovating. I was like, actually, it's not that bad at all. And once you realize that the good perks of online learning too, of course, I believe in synchronous online learning still. Asynchronous online learning is very difficult because you really do not have a lot of direct engagement with your students and your faculty. So I don't think that asynchronous learning is that effective at all. But synchronous learning can be as effective as as effective as a traditional classroom learning. There are some advantages of online learning, synchronous learning as well. And after COVID, there were a lot of educational technology innovations and developments that really ushered a new, phase of, I would say, paradigm shift even in thinking about, online education can be effective. And I give examples to those who are quite, skeptics. For example, in a traditional classroom, right? If I want to have, let's say I have 20 students in a traditional classroom, and if I want the students to have small, discussion, groups. Let's say I divide 20 students into 5 groups of 4, right? So I have 5 groups, and then I would, tell, okay, you 4 students go to that corner, 4 of you go to that corner, and I would kind of like place the students in these corners so that they can really create a space of their own to discuss, right? But if you have a small classroom, which is typically what happens when you are in a classroom of 20 students, it's quite frustrating because you have these 5 groups talking, right? And it can be quite annoying because you can hear students from another group, and like you really cannot focus on your discussion. Whereas in an online synchronous learning, in a Zoom session, I can just create into Zoom group breakout groups, right? And so students can really focus on their discussion without interference from other groups, and you don't have a lot of background noise anymore. And I think that's a great thing about a Zoom session, where I can really create as many groups as I want without interfering you know in each other's groups. And then the second thing that I really like about online learning is screen sharing. That 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 is one feature that I really like about in traditional classroom. You would put it on a projector, and then some students from a distance will not be able to see what's on the screen, or sometimes um because of the lighting or whatever, that they cannot see, and you kind of have to like students have difficulty seeing what's on the screen. Whereas it's with the screen sharing Zoom session, it's very clear that everybody has access to what is being shared very clearly on the screen. And so these are the good perks about. And then with a learning management system, modern learning management systems like Canvas and all that, there are a lot of great things that you can do within the learning management system that you cannot do in a traditional classroom at all anymore. In a traditional classroom, students who are kind of introverted students are usually left behind, right? Because in a traditional classroom, you typically will see students who are very active verbally, right? Those students who are not that active verbally are kind of like left behind. Whereas in an online learning, you say, okay, we gave the floor to all students to discuss, but then there's also a chat function, right, in Zoom. And students who are kind of like introverts can also share their opinions in chat function in the chat group. And they can share their opinions, and so it's more democratic in a way, and leveling out among extroverted students and introverted students. So that is that there are some pros and cons, of course, of online learning and a traditional classroom.
Yeah, and I guess you can apply AI too, right? So it can
Absolutely, yeah.
generate transcripts automatically, summaries, things like that. I know that when I in board meetings or I chair board meetings, and when there's a lot of discussion being presented, but there's a lot of discussion in the chat where people would see something being presented, and then they'll say, "Hey, how about this resource? Have you considered this?" So it's adding to the conversation without interrupting the flow.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I could see a lot of advantages. I guess the concern is how do you prevent or manage exams and testing and
Yeah.
things like that? And do you have to go to a residential part to be able to do testing?
Not at all.
How would you
Not
manage
at
that?
all. Yeah, I mean, like, it's actually relatively more simple than we thought. There are even proctoring tools that you can use. For example, there are these AI tools that can now detect your movement, right? They can lock your screen. For example, if you are taking a quiz, right? You cannot do kind of like searches. Or Google searches or things like that, through a different browser or things like that. So you can really um, do the proctoring. But then, of course, our students are in our programs because they actually want to learn, right? We are not a for-profit university in Burma. Typically, many of these for-profit universities in Burma, uh, they they do not emphasize that much on learning, actual learning. Whereas Parami, it's there's just a lot of learning that students actually have to do. So unless you really want to learn, students um, are not in our programs. So we have when we do admissions and evaluation and all that, we have already tested whether the students actually want to learn, genuinely are interested to learn, and then so our students want to learn. And if they're cheating, it defeats the whole purpose of their learning as well. So there is a more incentive, their own natural incentive for them to be in our programs to learn amidst all the challenges that they're going through. So that's already quite a great motivating factor. In fact, the best motivating factor for students not to cheat.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I guess that's the big controversial area, anyways, right? Because the advent of Chat GPT or large language models, and people are wondering how do you prevent, you know, how do you make sure that the work is
Exactly.
original and so on, and it's a big transformation that's occurring in education,
Yep.
and that'll be part of your journey.
That's right. And it's not limited to online learning, right? I mean, like even in a traditional classroom, you can use ChatGPT to write your paper and then print it out and then submit it to your professor. So it's not even, you know, I would say uh, screening, right? Or detecting whether someone is doing plagiarism or AI cheating, right? Or ChatGPT cheating. It's even easier with online learning, online synchronous learning, because our students submitted their, you know, assignments, papers, reports through our learning management platform, which has the AI component, AI detection component, to see whether students have plagiarized or used AI tool to write their paper. Whereas in a traditional classroom, it might even be more difficult, because if you receive a paper version of your essay, then you know, the teacher will have to scan it, or, you know, convert it into Word document or PDF for it to be uh, to detect cheating with the ChatGPT. Whereas through our learning management system, it is more streamlined in its detection.
So that's remarkable what you're working on. And we talked about the ideal case of 2030, where you want this to be built out. And how about you personally? So let's get away from your sort of your administrative role. Where would you like to see yourself personally in your development, let's say by 2035?
Thank you. I would like to envision a future where, because my future is really tied to the future of my country, fellow uh, um, men and women, and young people. So I would like to envision a future where we are really free to learn, free to pursue our dreams and hopes in Burma. And hopefully by 2000, you know, hopefully even in the next couple of years, or 3, 4 years, we can pursue that dream and I can go back to Burma. Right now I'm based in New York City, and hopefully by 2030, or even sooner, I like to relocate back to Burma and engage with my um, Burmese young people, young Burmese people.
And if you were to, because you're in the middle of education and you founded a university, a college, and it's focused on empowerment, diversity, inclusion, how would you forecast education changing, let's say in 10 years? What do you think education will look like? And you're at the forefront, right? Because you have to use virtual digital technology, which is really at the forefront. What will education look like in 2035 in your mind?
Yeah, that's a great question, Stephen. Thanks for asking. And this again, now I want to tie back to ChatGPT. Many professionals in the academia, right, in the field of academia, or they feel threatened by artificial intelligence and, you know, ChatGPT and all these like large language modeling tools. And to me, it poses an exciting opportunity for students, right? And we kept telling our students, look, you have to plan for your future, right? Not plan for what jobs are available right now in 2023. That's not how you think about your education. At least a bachelor's degree is going to finish in 4 years. So we're even talking about 2027, right? And then so 2026, 27, And so you have to kind of like, I know that it's an unpredictable environment because there's so much kind of like progress and a lot of uncertainties and changes, right? So the idea is to empower oneself to be as flexible as possible, right? Not just um, trained and educated in one very narrow field and be done and satisfied about it. It's students must be given skills, competencies that will allow them to cross boundaries easily, even into unknown areas easily. And then so that's where we have to focus on. And then so the future of education is not about just, field specific knowledge and skills, right? It's really about cross boundary knowledge and skills, critical thinking, right? Interpersonal skills, communication skills, and where does the AI, uh, um, what can AI not do, and where does we need the human touch, right? Everybody would crave for a human touch, right? And then so where does that lie, and what can educators provide in that space?
Do you think that educators will be replaced by some kind of teaching agent and where humans are out of the loop?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Uh, there will be so AI tools will be there to support the human touch, as I said. The human uh, faculty, teachers are always going to be there, because any um, parent would want to see their son or daughter being engaged with a human teacher, a human professor. Of course, AI and ChatGPT and all these other tools will play in supporting roles. But I wouldn't want to see my son or daughter, being mentored by an AI, but have a personal touch as well. I think that would be something that everybody would crave for as well. So I don't think that human faculty will be replaced. However, professors, academics, educators must figure out where their value added opportunities lie, and craft that space on their own as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're in interesting times, right? I mean, you saw Apple come up with the Apple Vision Pro. You've seen some of these other high-end, Microsoft has their HoloLens technology they've had for quite a while. They're getting much more immersive. You have Patty Mays at MIT Media Labs doing some amazing work,
Yep.
And her research group, and where the environments can be totally immersive, and
That's right.
you don't have to be physically there. You get all sorts of cues. The AI can generate cues of the sentiment of other people around you, just
Yep.
from the tone of their voice, their eye movements, and so on. And you can get all sorts of contextual information that you can't even get in face-to-face meetings. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out, and in the near term, much nearer, I think, than people realize. So, in looking at all the things that you're doing today, and now more generalizing, what kind of recommendations would you give to the audience? And
Yeah.
that's the final question, by the way.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, so as an educator, I would like to encourage uh, anyone to start seriously engaging with educational institutions to shape the next generation young thinkers and doers. This is really important because, you know, if you ask young people these days, they are worried, understandably, right? They are really worried because they kept saying, okay, things are gonna change in the next 2 years. I don't know how to plan for my life. And they have a valid reason. And I wouldn't, I like to, encourage older generation to be a bit more understanding in that sense as well. You know, um, back 10 even 10 years ago, 20 years ago, life projections, I would say at least career projections are a bit more stable, and you can kind of like plan, okay, this is where I want to go, because there are not a lot of advancements and changes, right? AI is going to really disrupt a lot of things, right? And then so young people these days are very nervous. They said, okay, there is this tool now, and my those individuals, for example, who are in the field of accounting, right? Now with the QuickBooks and all that, really advanced, sophisticated, that can replace a lot of junior accountants. But then even then you still need there's a human touch still at a higher level, but still, right? And then also those individuals who want to become, let's say, tourist guides, let's say, and they learn a language, and then wanna be have a professional tourist guide role. AI is going to replace that as well, right? And so what are the areas in which the AI is not going to replace? And that's where a lot of industry leaders can provide a great deal of insight to educators, right? We cannot operate alone. And so I would suggest that you engage with us as soon as possible. I'm sure that many of you are doing that. Even many corporate organizations are already working on their own programs as well. But please engage with traditional hardcore universities, so that we can prepare for the future.
Well, that's very good advice. So thank you, John, for coming in and sharing your insights with your audience. You have a really interesting narrative, and on your journey, inspired from your father who passed away, but his spirit continues to live and guide your vision today and into the future. And thank you for sharing so much during this chat we had today.
Of course, it's my pleasure. It's really my honor too.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.